Hi folks, welcome back to episode 4 of my favorite series, I Like Big Boats and I Cannot Lie, the weekly ordeal where I talk about my favorite thing, submarines. I hope your week has been wonderful and fulfilling. There's a brand new week ahead of us, and it's looking quite nautical. Let's take a moment to relax and get ready for the episode by taking a few deep breaths allowing our bodies to release the tension of the week. We've been through a lot, good and bad, and all of that takes a toll. This is our chance to relax and reset for the week to come. The challenges that lie ahead are simply challenges to overcome, and overcome them we shall, one way or another, as friends and fellow relaxation seekers. Don't worry. You're not alone in the darkness. We're all in it with you. This week begins with the 6th of October and runs to the 12th. We've got plenty of boats to talk about, so let's dive right in. The 6th of October opens with the keel laying for the USS Mackerel, SS-204, by Electric Boat Company, Groton, Connecticut, in 1939. Mackerel and her sister ship, Marlin, designed and built by the Portsmouth Navy Yard, were prototype submarines meant to replace the S-class. They didn't make it very far as a concept. By 1941, it was clear that fleet submarines could indeed be mass-produced, so small subs like these became less important to the Navy. There really isn't much information about these boats. In 1944, the USS Tench, SS-417, was commissioned, with Commander William B. Seagloff in command. Tench was built by Portsmouth Navy Yard of Kittery, Maine, and was the lead ship of her class, the only ship to be named for the Tench. 40 years later, in 1984, the USS Henry N. Jackson, SSBN 730, was commissioned. She's the only Ohio-class sub not to be named for a U.S. state. Originally, her name was to have been Rhode Island until the Washington State Senator passed away suddenly in his office on the 1st of September 1983. Rhode Island was then passed on to the unnamed Hull 740. Henry M. Jackson's motto is Defender of Freedom, and her home port is Naval Base Kitsap Bangor, Washington. Moving on to the 17th, we have the USS 016, laid down by California Shipbuilding Company of Long Beach, California. Being one of the later boats in the class, she was designed by Lake Torpedo Boat Company to different specifications than the ones built by Electric Boat. These later boats did not perform as well and are sometimes considered a separate class. O-class subs were 175 feet in length, with a 16-foot beam and a 13-foot draft. Surfaced, they relied on two 440 brake horsepower diesel engines, each driving one propeller shaft that could run them at 14 knots. Underwater, their propellers ran with the use of 370 horsepower electric motors, which could run them 10.5 knots. All of this stuff is cool and all, but my favorite part about the O-class is the 3-inch 50 caliber deck gun. Next up we have the Cuttlefish SS-171, one of two Cachalot-class submarines, as well as one of the V-boats. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's start at the beginning. The Cachalot-class submarines were two boats built under the tonnage limits of the London Naval Treaty of 1930. The other was USS Cachalot, SS-170. Seems like these boats were highly experimental. A V-boat is one of 9 subs built between World War I and World War II under authorization as the, quote, Fleet Boat Program. All 9 served in World War II at some point. Cuttlefish was the first sub built entirely at Electric Boat's facility in Groton. She was laid down on the 7th in 1931. Before then, previous boats had been subcontracted out to other yards, most notably Four River Shipbuilding of Quincy, Massachusetts. Next is USS Tenosa, SS-283. She was a Gato-class submarine launched on the 7th of October in 1942. Tenosa was laid down on the 21st of February by Mare Island Navy Yard in Vallejo, California. Her sponsor was Mrs. Catherine Shanks Malloy, wife of Captain William E. Malloy. Mare Island Naval Shipyard is no more. The facility was decommissioned in March of 1996. However, if you've ever seen Bumblebee, some of the final fight scenes were shot there. Once I learned that, I think I spent more time looking at the background than I did the actual film. The film was pretty good, though. I enjoyed it. But I've been told I have bad taste in movies, so I might not be allowed to comment.
USS Washington, SSN 787, was commissioned on the 7th of October in 2016. Washington is a Block 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarine home-ported at Naval Station Norfolk. Her motto is, "Preserving peace, prepared for war." She's still so new there isn't much to talk about, but I'll briefly touch on the meaning of Block 3. It's basically like a version of a ship. Block 3 has a different bow than the previous. I'll put a link in the description where it talks about the large aperture bow array and how it replaces the 12 vertical launch array tubes with two 87-inch payload tubes for launching Tomahawks.
I feel like we've never discussed Virginia-class boats before. They're very new. Many of them are still under construction or haven't even been planned out yet. It's exciting, isn't it? A whole new generation being built right now. The industry is changing and evolving day by day. Electric Boat must be so busy. I wonder if any Electric Boat employees will ever see this. If any of you folks work for EB, leave a comment and say hi. Honestly, if you work for the Navy or a shipyard and you feel comfortable saying so, I'd love to hear from you. Any and all comments are welcome, but it would still be a thrill to see some shipyard workers commenting. The only entry I have for the 8th of October is the USS Scamp, SSN 588, a skipjack-class sub launched by Mare Island Naval Shipyard. She was sponsored by Mrs. John C. Hollingsworth, widow of the commander of the previous USS Scamp, SS-277, at the time of her loss in November 1944. Skipjack class entered service between 1959 to 1961. They were the first class of boat with the teardrop hull and the S-5W reactor, and until the Los Angeles class were the fastest ship in the fleet. There were 6 skipjacks, one of which, USS Scorpion, was tragically lost. I'll do a video on her, most likely, when the time comes. That's an interesting story, but I think it deserves its own video. Next we have October 9th and the commissioning of the USS Sandlance, SS-381, in 1943. Sandlance was a Vallejo submarine, first of her name. She was built by Portsmouth Naval Shipyard of Kittery, Maine. From the time she was placed into active service until 18 December 1943, Sandlance participated in training exercises around New London, Connecticut. Then she transited to the Panama Canal and reached her base of operations, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on the 17th of January 1944. 1976 sees the launching of the USS Groton, SSN 694, a Los Angeles class sub built by Electric Boat in Groton. She was sponsored by Mrs. Anne Frances Richardson, the wife of the Secretary of Commerce, Elliot L. Richardson. Her motto was the submarine capital of the world. She was homeported in Groton, which I suppose makes sense. Though I wonder why Washington wasn't homeported in Washington state. Groton has been scheduled to enter the ship and submarine recycling program in Bremerton, Washington on the 1st of October 2011. Soon she'll be scrap metal. In 1995, USS Columbia SSN 771 was commissioned. She was also built by Electric Boat. However, unlike Groton, Columbia is still active service with Submarine Squadron 7, homeported at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in Hawaii. Their motto is, preserving freedom on the seas. On October 10th, 1919, the USS R-14 SS-91 was launched by Four River Shipbuilding of Quincy, Massachusetts. Her sponsor was Miss Florence L. Gardner. Unfortunately, I didn't get any information on her. R-class subs were used as harbor defense boats following the American entry into World War I. In late September 1945, USS S-43, SS-154, had been shifted to San Francisco, California for her decommissioning on the 10th of October. Her ceremony with the crew was held on the 22nd. She was stripped the same month, and her name was struck from the Naval Vessel Register on the 13th of November. She was sold for scrap to the Salco Iron and Metal Company of San Francisco the following year. S-43 had survived 3 war patrols during the course of World War II. She received the American Defense Service Medal for her work. In 1957, USS Sargo, SSN 583, was launched by the wife of Rear Admiral Frank T. Watkins. Sargo was a Skate-class nuclear-powered sub built by Mare Island Naval Shipyard. Her motto was, 2 screws are better than one. This 267-foot-long sub, powered by an S-3W reactor, held 95 officers and enlisted men. In 2015, the USS Illinois, SSN 786, was christened by First Lady Michelle Obama in Groton, Connecticut. Illinois is another Virginia-class sub, Block 3. Her motto is, Nemo Magis Fortier, none more brave. How lovely. Her current home port is in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Moving on to the 11th of October, we begin with a bit of a sad one. In 1943, the USS Wahoo, SS-283, was bombarded by Japanese ships and aircraft in La Perouse Strait. She was declared overdue on the 2nd of December and stricken from the Naval Vessel Register on the 6th. The Wahoo Project Group, a team of Americans, Australians, Japanese, and Russians, led by a relative of the ship's commander, began a search in 1995. On the 31st of October 2006, the U.S. Navy confirmed that the images provided by the Russian Iskra team were that of Wahoo lying 213 feet deep in the La Perouse Strait. The Navy conducted a wreath-laying ceremony on the 8th of July 2007 and a remembrance ceremony on the 11th of October 2007 for the Wahoo crew. They remain on eternal patrol. October 11th, 1969 brings the decommissioning and striking from the Naval Vessel Register of the USS Spinax, SS-489, a 10th-class diesel-electric submarine built by Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. She had been declared unfit for further service in September 1969. She was sold to Sidel Explorations Incorporated on the 13th of June, 1972. On the same day, we have the commissioning of the USS Grayling, SSN 646, a sturgeon-class attack submarine built by Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Her keel was laid on the 12th of May, 1964, and she was launched on the 22nd of June, 1967, sponsored by Miss Lori Brinker, daughter of Lieutenant Commander Brinker, commanding officer of the previous Grayling, when she was lost with all hands in September of 1943 during World War II. Lastly, we have the 12th of October. Let's start with the USS Holland, SS-1, the very first commissioned submarine of the United States Navy. She was commissioned in 1900, having been built by Crescent Shipyard of Elizabeth, New Jersey. She only lasted 5 years, with a decommissioning on July 17, 1905. I cannot imagine what it must have been like to ride in this boat. It's the turn of the century. She's only 53 feet long, 8.5 feet wide. She moves at a speed of 6 knots, 75 feet down. You're sharing the space with 5 other people. Your only defense is 3 torpedoes and a dynamite gun, which, by the way, how cool is that? That space must have been so terribly cramped. And in 1900, I can't imagine the conditions were all that good, safe, or sanitary. I imagine those men must have been incredibly brave. Certainly braver than me. Next on the list is the USS Dorado SS-248, which is unfortunately another sad story. It is most likely that October 12, 1943 is the date the Scotto-class diesel-electric submarine was sunk off the coast of Panama. She completed sea trials and sailed from Naval Submarine Base, New London on 6 October for the Panama Canal Zone, but never arrived. She remains on eternal patrol. Dorado was one of only 2 Navy subs lost in the Atlantic Ocean during World War II, the other being USS R-12. In 1968, the USS Whale, SSN 638, was commissioned. The Whale, second of her name, was built by General Dynamics Quincy Shipbuilding Division in Massachusetts. She was a Sturgeon-class attack submarine, powered by an S-5W reactor, propelled at a speed of 25 knots submerged by its single propeller. Sturgeon submarines were 292 feet in length, with a 31-foot beam and a 28-foot draft, carrying a complement of 107 sailors. Lastly, we have the USS Virginia, SSN 774, the first of the Virginia submarines. Wow, didn't talk about them up until now, and suddenly we've got a bunch here. She was acquired on the 12th of October 2004. Her home port is in Groton, Connecticut, and her motto is Sic Semper Tyrannis. I know it doesn't go along with the rest of them. I mean, what does an acquisition mean? But I really wanted to talk more about Virginia boats because I think they're cool. They cost $6 billion. Yes, with a B. Block 1 Virginias have 12 vertical launch tubes and 4 torpedo tubes for Mark 48 torpedoes and Tomahawks. I could talk about torpedoes in a future video if anyone's interested, but that's probably a whole lot of boring. That's all for this week, folks. I hope you enjoyed. As always, I hope you're at least bored to sleep listening to random facts about random boats. Take care of yourselves, be kind to one another, and stay safe.